Story 1. I used to live in a modular housing community, also known as trailer park, that was basically a quiet retirement community with little traffic, crime, or animosity between neighbors. Good ownership and management kept it that way, and everyone was happy living there. The police would occasionally cruise through, but only because they enjoyed spending some quiet time in an area of town that wasn't riddled with crime. It was a break for them, and we enjoyed having them there mostly to talk baseball and exchange jokes with. Within a couple of years, though, the community was sold to a new owner and management company, and they basically let anyone who could pay the lot rent in without any vetting to keep the unruly out. The place went to hell within 3 months with loud parties at night and plenty of crime, with the police there literally every night shutting down parties, arresting drug dealers, investigating break-ins, and such. I lived at a space that was located at the top of where 2 roads connected to form a T dead-ended intersection, and one of our new tenants liked to drive their ridiculously lowered vehicle with an exhaust system that amplified the engine noise to its loudest through the park late at night, and do a nightly U-turn over my lawn and driveway so they could head back down the road they just came up. I'm guessing primarily to double the noise in the neighborhood, while avoiding having to turn too sharply with their modified suspension by driving over my lawn. This repeatedly happened, and sometimes the tire tracks were as much as 3 to 4 feet over the road into my lawn and across my driveway. The lawn actually belonged to the park, but it was my contractual responsibility to keep the lawn and the rest of the property looking nice. So naturally I was PO'd at having to repeatedly fix my lawn, because the jerk down the street enjoyed driving on it and tearing it up. I went to the park's new management, complained about the damage the new neighbors were doing to my lawn, and got the typical trifecta response. First, we don't care because it's really park property and you still have to maintain it. Second, we don't care because we want the increased lot revenue from the new tenants more. And third, stop being a Karen and suck it up and shut up because we don't care since you're on an old contract at a low fixed rental rate that we can't legally jack up through the roof. I reread my contract closely to make sure I was within my tenant rights relating to temporary landscape improvements, and went to the river to find 2 large smooth river rocks that had just the right shape and weight as temporary landscape improvements 4 to 6 inches high, and weighed at least 25 pounds each. After a couple of hours, I found just the right ones, hauled them home, and painted them green to match the lawn, painted some decorative flowers on the sides, and plopped one down in each corner of my lawn and driveway. We shall say purely for aesthetic enhancement. About 2 in the morning that night, I could hear the jerk with the super loud exhaust pipe on his car, with the ridiculously lowered suspension coming down the road to perform his usual U-turn over my lawn. I sat in my darkened house watching with glee as he ran up over the rocks, got high-centered, and had to jack up the car to get the rocks out from underneath. They also knocked his suspension loose with one front tire aiming off in a slightly different direction than the other, and completely detached the super loud exhaust pipe that the jerk had to chuck into the back seat of his car. The best part was watching him slowly limp his now very quiet but squirrely steering car back down the road the direction it came. The next day in the afternoon, surprisingly, the park manager knocked on my door and said they had received a complaint that I had damaged another tenant's vehicle by placing rocks in the road, and wanted an explanation. I grabbed my park contract and showed them my new decorative landscape enhancements placed fully within the boundaries of my lawn. I made it a sickeningly repetitive point to make sure the park manager saw both the tire tracks and the resulting damage to my lawn, the scratches the undercarriage did to my new decorative rocks, and the section in my contract regarding temporary landscape improvements. And I explained the rocks were there to stay until I got eviction papers. I never heard super loud pipes or from the manager again, and my lawn remained perfect after that. Story 2. This is more of a I used to work here, but no longer do sort of story. So I used to work for a very well-known craft store that also sold a lot of fabrics. I was so excited to get hired at this store because I absolutely loved shopping here. My love for this store quickly went down the drain. We were forced to wear these huge, neon green aprons that we weren't allowed to take home and wash. I'm a small woman, about 5'3". My apron came down to my ankles, and my managers refused to order me a smaller size. Well, along with my apron dress, I was also scheduled 4 to 8 hours a week. I basically got paid enough to afford the gas to drive to work. I also had a manager who hated me for no apparent reason. I'd ask for a quick restroom break and get threatened with a write-up. Show up early for work, get accused of trying to rip off the company for extra money. Just blatant harassment. It's worth noting that I worked here for 4 months, and none of the managers, including the general manager, remembered my name. The breaking part for me was when I got my new schedule for the week, and my general manager had me down to work 12 to 14-hour shifts every day that week. I told my general manager about my college class hours, and she told me to just skip because they needed me more since she was going on vacation to Mexico. Ha, no witch. You can't remember my name, and now you're gonna work me to death because you want to dip out suddenly. Nope. I didn't show up for work that first 14-hour shift for the week, and nobody noticed. Fast forward to the end of the week. No calls from anyone. Okay, peace out. Now for the good part. I hadn't worked there for about 3 months when I got a random phone call. I answered, and I'm instantly getting screamed at by some super pissed off lady. I deleted the store number, so I didn't realize it was my old general manager calling me. General manager, where are you? You were scheduled to be here at 11 a.m., and it's 2 p.m. Get here. Now. Me? Who is this? How dare you? Have you forgotten who you're speaking to? Ooh, yes, actually. I'm writing you up as soon as you get here. You better get here as soon as possible. Crazy witch hangs up, and I'm sitting there like, did she just now realize I haven't been showing up for work? There's no way, right? Well, I decided to be a jerk, and I showed up to the store. Walked right up to my old boss, hoping she'd just lay into me so I could get her fired for yelling at a customer. Nope, she didn't even realize who I was. I ended up buying some mermaid scale print fabric and giving the store a super useless survey and using the general manager's name personally. Blocked the store number as well. Edit. I'm gonna clarify some stuff. Yes, they really kept me employed there for the 3 months I didn't show up for work. No, unfortunately, I didn't get paid for them. After my encounter with the crazy witch, I received an email from the company asking me to give an exit survey about my time employed with them. I dragged this company to the 9th circle of hell and back. I blasted the horrible management, the fact that I wasn't allowed to keep anything in my work locker after my shift, and the awful treatment of other coworkers by the general manager. She got on the headset one day and threatened to slap me. I did get a response from corporate, saying they would look into it. She got demoted for a few months to floor supervisor, then totally fired for mistreating the employees. Story 3. You just won't believe the wild scene I witnessed at the grocery store the other day. I was just minding my own business, trying to grab some snacks when I saw this Karen with her crazy antics. Let me tell you the whole story. I was casually going about my business, picking up groceries, when out of nowhere, Karen appears right beside me, giving me the stink eye like I did something wrong. I could practically feel the tension oozing out of her. I tried my best to ignore her, thinking she was just having a bad day or something. But no, that wasn't enough for her. Karen decides to speak up and says, "You're in my way, move." I was taken aback because, to be honest, I wasn't blocking anything. There was plenty of space for her to go around. But you know how these entitled people are, they just want to cause trouble for no reason. So, I politely reply, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was in your way. You can go ahead." But of course, that's not what she wanted. She starts rambling about how I'm intentionally blocking her path, and that I must be doing it on purpose because I'm rude. Rude? Me? I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. I tried to diffuse the situation by saying, "Look, I didn't mean to upset you. Let's just both go about our shopping, and there won't be any issues." You'd think that would be enough, right? But oh no, Karen was not about to back down. She takes it as a personal challenge and starts raising her voice, drawing attention to our little encounter. Now, I'm not one to get into unnecessary conflicts, so I decide to walk away and continue my shopping. But Karen was not about to let me off the hook that easily. She follows me around, still hurling insults and accusing me of being disrespectful. I can't help but roll my eyes at this point. It's like dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum over a candy bar. I try my best to keep my cool and not engage with her nonsense. But here's the kicker: she sees me looking at some baby products, and that's when she really loses it. She starts ranting about how I shouldn't be allowed near babies because I'm probably some kind of child abductor. Can you believe that? Now, I'm a calm and patient person, but this was crossing the line. I look at her and say, "Listen, lady, I don't know what your problem is, but you're way out of line. I have as much right to be here as anyone else. And for your information, I have a niece who I adore, so don't you dare make baseless accusations." But of course, Karen wouldn't back down. She starts attracting even more attention, and people around us are just staring like we're some kind of reality TV show. All over nothing. Thankfully, a store employee notices the commotion and steps in to mediate. I explain the situation, and the employee handles it quite professionally, asking Karen to calm down and reminding her that we're all just trying to shop peacefully. It was like she finally realized that her antics were getting her nowhere, and she begrudgingly walks away, muttering under her breath. Phew, I thought it was over, but little did I know that her craziness was just getting started. Not long after, she'd have the entire police force pointing their guns at her in a shocking scene. Let's get to that part, shall we? After my stupid encounter with Karen, I decide to discreetly keep an eye on Karen from a distance, hoping she'll just move on and leave the store. And that's when I spot this young mom, with her adorable baby boy fast asleep in a stroller. The little one looked like an angel, all snug in his blanket. But then, out of nowhere, enters Karen, the classic entitled lady from earlier. Karen walks up to the young mother and exclaims, "Oh, what a precious little baby. Can I play with him?" The young mother in a polite tone tells her, "I'm sorry, but he's sleeping, and I don't want him to wake up just yet." But Karen simply won't take no for an answer. She keeps insisting, "Oh, come on, he won't mind a little playtime." The mother stands her ground, saying, "No, thank you. He needs his rest, and I don't want to disturb him." Well, you know how entitled people are, they don't understand the word no. Karen starts getting all huffy and puffy, and before we know it, she's shouting at the top of her lungs. The poor baby wakes up, crying his little eyes out, and his mama rushes to pick him up, trying to soothe him. But guess what? Karen, out of nowhere, reaches into the stroller, picks up the baby before his mother does, and starts pacing away towards the exit gate. It was like a scene from a dramatic movie. The mother is losing it at this point, screaming and running behind Karen, begging people to stop her. We all rush to help, but Karen is relentless, making her way to the parking lot with a baby in her arms. Just as we think things can't get any crazier, a good Samaritan steps in and blocks Karen's path, preventing her from going any further. Meanwhile, the police clearly have been called, and in no time, multiple officers are on the scene, guns drawn. It's like a showdown, and all of us bystanders are just watching in shock. But here's the twist: turns out, that little baby boy is none other than the grandson of the police chief himself. Talk about a plot twist. Seeing the entire police force pointing their guns at her, Karen finally snaps back to reality. She must have realized the mess she caused and got herself into. The chief's grandson, of all people. She hands the baby over to one of the female officers, who hands him back to his mother, while Karen's still muttering nonsense about how the baby can't possibly be the mother's because he doesn't look like her, and that she was doing the baby a favor, getting him away from that strange woman pushing him around. Oh boy, did that lady dig herself into a deep, crazy hole. The police chief arrives on the scene, and he looks furious, to say the least. I couldn't help but feel a bit of satisfaction watching Karen squirm in her entitled outrage. The chief approaches his crying daughter, who's still shaken and hugging her baby tightly, and assures her that everything is going to be okay. The officers take Karen into custody, and that's when we all finally breathe a sigh of relief. I mean, seriously, What was Karen thinking? Trying to steal a baby and then claiming the mom wasn't his real mom. That's some next-level entitled behavior. The police chief personally thanks the Good Samaritan who stopped Karen, and all of us witnesses get interviewed by the officers, telling them what happened. It was like we were part of a real-life crime investigation or something. After what felt like an eternity, the chief comes over to thank all of us personally for helping and being there for his daughter and her baby. Thankfully, the young mother and her baby are doing fine now, and they've become sort of local celebrities. Everyone in the neighborhood is rallying around them, offering support and love. In the days following the incident, and as the legal proceedings began, Karen was charged with a series of offenses, including kidnapping, assault, and endangering the welfare of a child. The charges carried severe penalties, and it became apparent that Karen's actions would have lifelong repercussions. Karen was sentenced to 10 years in prison, along with probation upon her release. The court also imposed a restraining order, preventing her from ever being near the mother and her baby again. So, there you have it. Guys, everything that happened on the craziest day and the craziest encounter I have ever been a part of. I'm glad my encounter with that Karen prior to the kidnapping incident didn't take a worse turn. Who knows what she might have done to me if I were to escalate, to be honest. I'm glad that we'll never know. Story 4. When I turned 14 years old, I got my first summer job and had one of the best bosses I'd ever had. I recently found out that unfortunately my mentor and someone I would consider a friend, John, passed away. Although it's been well over 20 years, I still use the lessons learned and the work ethic he passed on to me. Although at times he could be hard, he was more than fair and always did the right thing for those that worked for him. This is the story of John versus the new president. Before I get into the story, I need to give some background and context on John. John was the textbook all-American boy. John had attended a prestigious boarding school somewhere in New England and eventually attended Yale back in the late 50s and was not only a scholar but a three-sport athlete. He played football, he boxed, and was a captain on the track and field team. Fast forward to when this story takes place and John was still in phenomenal shape for a late 60s, early 70s man. John opted to move out to the country, start a family to follow his passion, which was teaching at the local high school and coaching high schoolers in various sports. Obviously, he was the high school football coach, taught track and field. He was an outstanding shot-put athlete and could run the mile and many other long distances. As a teacher, he had the summers off and became a lifeguard at the local town beach, eventually becoming the captain of the lifeguards. Over time, he developed standards for the town/county/state lifeguards to pass. He really transformed what was a ragtag style of lifeguards into a full-fledged official lifeguard corps training academy and set the standards for what is still used today. John was eventually hired to run the lifeguards and manage an entire private beach club instead of working for the town beach. One of the biggest challenges of this, since it was a private beach club, John now reported into a president of the beach club who oversaw how things were run. I started working for John as a helper on the beach and then eventually a lifeguard, and for the first couple of summers things were great. The president of the beach club took pride in having the best staff and making sure that lifeguards were well paid, and to his credit, safety was the utmost priority. This private beach club certainly catered to the more wealthy clientele who wanted a nicer club instead of going to the public beach. Some of the advantages were the amenities, which were lockers, cabanas, private parking, a very nice restaurant that served great food and drinks. This was one of the few beach clubs that also had the ability to serve alcoholic beverages. One of the good things John had instituted was that any returning member of the staff from the previous summers automatically got a raise. This ensured that staff returned the next summer, avoiding a lot of retraining, and as you can imagine, growing pains with a new staff. What was even better was that if you returned multiple summers, you still got an additional raise. Most summers, this was $1 or $2. As an example, I started at $7.25 at 14 years old. This was back in the late 90s, and by the time I was in college, I was making almost $15 an hour. Typically, the president of the club serves a term which is a few years, and when his term was up, a new president was ushered in. Upon taking office, the new president loudly proclaimed that he wanted to ensure that the club had fiscal responsibility, and he would be personally going over the books with a fine-tooth comb. His first order of business was to cut everyone's pay all the way back to minimum wage and fire most of the lifeguards. Now, as noted above, the staff was there for a long time, knowing most of the members and how to run the place. Prior to the start of the summer, upon learning that their hourly wage would be cut, most of the senior staff immediately left and were quickly hired elsewhere. The lifeguards were spared at the appeal of John to ensure safety. Although some senior guards left for other beaches and pools, John was able to convince the lifeguards as he would take care of things. On to the MC. While John agreed to have the staff take the pay cut, he convinced the new president that any lifeguards with additional certifications would get $2 an hour on top of the base minimum wage. The new president obviously didn't consider that any of these lifeguards would put in the effort, or if it was feasible to get any certifications in time for the summer season, and he agreed to the plan. As you can imagine, John basically established the process and curriculum for becoming a lifeguard and personally trained and hired most, if not all, the trainers in the town and county. John was also a volunteer fireman and knew all the EMS personnel, and not surprisingly had either taught them in school or hired them as lifeguards in their past lives. John quickly called in favors from every trainer and certifier across the county, who were more than happy to repay all the favors John had done for them in the past. Most waived the training fees and expedited the training sessions for the lifeguards, and they wanted to promote safety for the community. Prior to the start of the Memorial Day weekend, and what is effectively the unofficial start of summer, all of us lifeguards and new staff become certified in pretty much every single possible certification that existed at the time. I mean, I'm talking crazy, complete overkill and unnecessary certifications for a regular lifeguard. We got trained as either EMS and EMS. Although lifeguards had to be certified in CPR, we retrained and got our CPR certifications again. Life-saving ocean and pool rescue techniques, certified swimming instructor, certified food inspector. The club had a kitchen, certified county pool operator license, certified sanitary inspector cleaning the bathrooms. We even had one guy who wanted to learn how to scuba. The county's firefighters had a water rescue team who coincidentally were certified scuba instructors. Most of us guards become certified divers, open water divers, deep water rescue divers, the whole works. I could go on and on about all the certifications we got. The lifeguards not only went back to their original wage, but in most cases went well above what their previous wages were. At 18 years old and back in the 90s, I personally went from making $15 an hour to $27 an hour, all due to the certifications and training. It took a month or so for the fallout to happen. While the new president tried to renege on the deal, John was smart enough to have a formal arrangement in place, and there was nothing the new president could do besides whine about it. He wound up resigning his position to spend more time with his family at the beach. We rarely saw him around that summer, and I think he eventually stopped coming altogether, opting to join another club. John made nice with the new president and explained his philosophy on training and keeping staff. The new president agreed, and some of the senior staff wound up coming back with the promise of their original wage. A few weeks ago, I heard from friends and former colleagues that just at the start of the summer season, John passed away in sleep of natural causes at the ripe age of 91. He was still working, although not as much in the past. It was more of a I want to keep busy type of thing than a need to work. Every morning he would take out the lifeguard's rowboat and get some exercise in. After all, he was a certified rowing instructor. Rip John, you were the best. Story 5. Hey there, this is my first time posting here, or at least I think it is. I might have forgotten about a previous post, but who knows? Anyway, I've got a story for you about my boss and a company car that I think fits right in with this subreddit. So, I'm a painter by trade. I had just finished my apprenticeship and got my journeyman letter, which is basically a fancy way of saying I completed my training and was now a qualified painter. Now, usually, apprentices don't get company cars. That's something you have to wait for, even after you become a journeyman. But my boss, let's call him Mr. Entitled, had other plans. One day, Mr. Entitled calls me into his office with this smug look on his face. He's sitting there, looking all important behind his desk, and he says, "Mr. Entitled, we've got a new car for the company. It's going to be a pool car, but I want you to use it whenever no one else needs it." Now, I'm thinking, great, a car I can use. But I should have known better. Nothing's ever that simple with Mr. Entitled. So I ask him, "So, will you drive me to work tomorrow so I can take it home then?" Mr. Entitled, "No, it's a pool car. It's to be parked on company ground during nights." I should have seen this coming. Mr. Entitled loves to dangle carrots in front of people's noses, only to yank them away at the last second. But two can play at that game. I decided right then and there that I was going to follow his rules to the letter. Malicious compliance, here we come. Now, you need to understand something about my job. I usually had a 40 to 60-minute drive to get to a job site. That meant I had to be at the company between 5 and 6 in the morning, depending on where I was going that day. We work from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., so you can imagine how early I had to wake up to make that happen. But remember, Mr. Entitled said the car had to stay on company grounds at night. So I wasn't about to go to the company at the crack of dawn just to drive their precious pool car to the job site. Nope, not happening. For a whole week, I showed up at the company at 7 a.m. sharp, picked up the car, and drove to wherever I was supposed to be working that day. Then, at 4:30 p.m., I'd drive back to the company, park the car, and go home. I knew this wasn't going to fly with Mr. Entitled for long, but I was curious to see how long it would take him to blow his top. It took exactly 1 week. On Friday afternoon, Mr. Entitled calls me into his office again. He's got this red face, like he's been holding his breath, and he looks like he's about to explode. He tells me he wants to write me up for not showing up to work on time. According to him, I have to follow the 8-hour workday rule. Now, I'm no pushover. I know my rights, and I know the union rules. So, I decide to play dumb and push his buttons a little more. You're right. I'll start to leave the car at 4 instead of 4:30. Mr. Entitled, what? No. You're supposed to be at the place at 7 and leave by 4. Well, I drive a pool car. According to the union rules, a pool car is to leave company ground at 7 and be parked by 4. That's the rules. I have to follow them. You should have seen his face. It was like watching a balloon deflate. He knew he was cornered, and there was nothing he could do about it. After a moment of sputtering and turning even redder if that was possible, he finally says, "Mr. Entitled, I'll pick you up tomorrow by 6:15. I couldn't help but smile. I had won this round, and we both knew it. Now, you'd think this would be the end of it, right? Mr. Entitled learned his lesson, and we'd all move on with our lives. But oh no, that's not how entitled people work. They always have to have the last word, always have to feel like they're in control. The next morning, true to his word, Mr. Entitled shows up at my place at 6:15. He's in his fancy car, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else but here. I hop in, and we start the drive to the company in silence. After about 10 minutes of this uncomfortable quiet, he finally speaks up. "Mr. Entitled, I was trying to do you a favor with that car." I almost laughed out loud. A favor? Really? But I kept my cool and decided to hear him out. How so? Mr. Entitled, well, most journeymen don't get access to a company car this early. I thought you'd appreciate the opportunity. Now, I'm not one to let an opportunity for some good old-fashioned sass go to waste, so I reply, I do appreciate opportunity, sir, especially ones that don't require me to break union rules or work unpaid hours. I swear I could hear his teeth grinding, but he keeps his composure, barely. Mr. Entitled, the union rules are just guidelines. Sometimes we need to be flexible for the good of the company. Oh boy, here we go. The classic, break the rules for the good of the company speech. I've heard this one before, and I'm not buying it. With all due respect, sir, the union rules are there to protect workers like me. If we start bending them, where do we draw the line? He doesn't have an answer for that one. We spend the rest of the ride in silence, but I can practically hear the gears turning in his head. He's trying to figure out how to get around this, how to make me do what he wants without actually giving me the benefits I deserve. We get to the company, and as I'm about to get out of the car, he stops me. Mr. Entitled, look, let's make a deal. You can take the car home, but I expect you to be at the job sites by 7 a.m. sharp. No exceptions. Now, this is interesting. He's offering what I wanted in the first place, but I'm not about to let him off the hook that easily. Me. And what about the overtime for the extra driving I'll be doing outside of work hours? Mr. Entitled looks like he's sucking on a lemon, but he knows he's cornered. Mr. Entitled, fine. We'll log the extra time as overtime, but I expect top-notch work from you, understood? Me, always, sir. You know I take pride in my work. And with that, I get out of the car and head to the pool car. As I'm driving to the job site, I can't help but feel a little smug. I didn't let Mr. Entitled push me around, and I even managed to get a better deal out of it. But here's the thing about entitled people, they never really learn. They might back down for a while, but they're always looking for the next opportunity to assert their perceived superiority. I knew this wasn't the end of my battles with Mr. Entitled, but for now, I had won. Over the next few weeks, things seemed to settle into a new routine. I'd take the car home, drive to job sites on time, and log my overtime for the extra driving. Mr. Entitled would give me the stink eye every now and then, but he couldn't say anything because I was following our agreement to the letter. But then, about a month after our little showdown, Mr. Entitled calls me into his office again. He's got that look on his face, the one that says he thinks he's got a brilliant idea. Mr. Entitled, we've been reviewing our expenses, and the overtime from your driving is really adding up. We need to make some changes. I knew it. I knew he couldn't let it go. So, I decided to play along and see where this is going. Me? What kind of changes did you have in mind, sir? Mr. Entitled, well, we're thinking of implementing a new policy. All employees who take company vehicles home will be responsible for their own gas for personal use. Now, this might not sound too bad at first, but remember, I'm driving this car to and from work every day. That's not personal use, that's work-related driving. So, I decide to clarify. Me, personal use as in weekends and after-hours trips, right? Not the driving to and from work sites? Mr. Entitled shifts in his seat, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Entitled, well, we consider the drive from your home to the first job site of the day as personal use. Oh, here we go again. Time to remind Mr. Entitled about those pesky union rules he likes to forget about. Me, sir, I don't think that aligns with our union agreement. The drive to the first job site is considered work time, especially since I'm in a company vehicle. Mr. Entitled's face is starting to turn that familiar shade of red again. Mr. Entitled, the union agreement is open to interpretation. We're just trying to manage our resources efficiently. I take a deep breath. I'm getting tired of this back and forth, but I'm not about to let Mr. Entitled walk all over me or my coworkers. Me, I understand you're trying to manage resources, sir, but changing the interpretation of our agreement without consulting the union could cause problems. Maybe we should invite a union rep to discuss this new policy. The mention of involving the union makes Mr. Entitled pale a bit. He knows he's on shaky ground here. Mr. Entitled, that won't be necessary. We'll review the policy again before implementing any changes. I nod, trying to hide my satisfaction. Another battle won, but the war with Mr. Entitled's entitlement is far from over. As I leave his office, I can't help but wonder what his next move will be. But whatever it is, I'll be ready.